Welcome back to another GTN Coaches Corner, where we answer your triathlon training and racing questions. You can send them in using the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner, and we try to answer all of them
We'll do our best.
We can.
Yeah,
and I've got Heather with me today, so it's going to be a good one.
Let's hope so.
All right, so first question from Daniel Castro. This is a long one, just to warn you. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Hey, I've been doing triathlon, actually, they said.
It's going to be longer.
Triathlon for over 2 years, having done everything except the long distance, but I still struggle to do the weekly plannings. This year I started first to prepare for some marathons while keeping triathlon training, and I think I overdid it. I'm now injured. My problem is time distribution. I normally prioritise more running, as in the beginning of the year I do more marathon racing. So if I am weekly training 12 hours, how much time should I spend on the other disciplines? To give you an example, in my biggest blocks I was running around 8 to 9 hours and training 14 hours. And secondly, if running wasn't a priority, training for a 70.3 for instance, what could be a good time distribution keeping the same 10 to 12 hours weekly training volume? I think I'll leave it there because I think we've got all the questions we need.
Yeah, I think we've kind of got it. So it's two sort of separate sections of his season that he's talking about, basically, if I summarise it. And
yes.
then he wants to know if his focus is running, is his ratio of overall 14 hours but 8 to 9 of them running okay? I think that's what he's saying.
And I think this is probably quite common. We get a lot of people saying, and I do the same. It's like on the off season, I might focus on some running events, and then I want to turn things around when it comes to season. I want to swim, bike, and run really well. So I think this is actually really common. And I guess the main thing is, what are your goals? What is kind of the
priority?
The priority, exactly. Is it the marathon, or is it are you just doing the triathlons for fun, or actually do you really want to perform in there, maybe above the performance of the marathons? And then also, you need to take into account, I'm assuming the run is probably your strongest discipline. And therefore, ordinarily what we would say is you could probably make bigger gains on the swim and the bike, and therefore actually pulling back on the run would make a lot of sense. But you want to do the marathons and do well in them. So
and you want to have fun, and you need to be motivated, don't you?
Exactly, yeah. So if you get a lot of satisfaction from going for these runs, more so than you do swim and bike, then yeah, you may want to do a bit more of that. So it comes back to finding out what is the priority for you, what you really are aiming for. And also, actually, sort of just to add to it, from an injury perspective, as you have mentioned a bit about that, the running is obviously going to have the biggest impact on that. And if you're trying to do a big mileage on running, and then you're doing a lot of swimming and biking on top of that, you're not allowing your body much recovery time. Yeah. Albeit, okay, they're not as quite, there's not as much impact from swimming and cycling, but still the body is going to be taking a lot of strain.
Overall stress,
Yeah.
I kind of feel like, if you almost just split the season into two and go, right, I love my running, do loads of running, use bike and swim for my recovery, for my running goals, get my marathons out of the way, they're usually in the spring, look for a 70.3 that's later, and then if you do really want to do that well, back off your running, and like Mark said, work on your 2 weaker disciplines. Yeah. Simples.
And then when it comes down to that kind of weekly distribution, you could go quite as simple as almost looking at a 70.3 distance kind of split proportionately. So actually 15% of your weekly volume would be swimming, and then 50% on the bike, 35% on the run. Probably works out pretty well. All right, next question then. Rockin' Roman 412. Hello, I've just completed my first ever triathlon, Torbay Sprint. Have you done that one?
Yeah, well, GTN has, Mark. You were busy that weekend, apparently, but we did.
Very pleased and enjoy it so much. I have another plan for next year. How do I, or should I, keep the momentum going and start my training again? Or do I enter a maintenance period until 12 weeks before and start a new plan? What do you do in between races to avoid slipping? Ooh.
I kind of feel like we've got the question's not quite right, if you know what I mean. So I think rather than going, how do I not slip between races, it's like, how do I actually just generally progress and move forwards? Because we don't need to go, we've got that one race, let's just wait for 12 weeks and then we're like, okay, we're ready to go. And you like suddenly try and train really hard for 12 weeks and it all just goes a little bit pear-shaped. But instead, look at training as actually part of the enjoyment as well as doing the triathlon. And you start to sort of put it into your life, and yes, you can work through cycles if you really want to, but maybe put some smaller races in sooner to help give you focus. But I wouldn't get too bogged down by it being 12 weeks of training.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like you're very early in that sort of triathlon journey. And I think actually just continuing to enjoy things and build that aerobic foundation and just, your fitness within that triathlon space, rather than worrying about periodizing your training, getting bogged down in that. Actually, I just capitalize on the fitness you've already gained and just keep that going, enjoying it. Of course, you could start being a bit more specific as you get into sort of the final 12 weeks, as you get close to the race, and just make sure you don't overdo things and sort of burn yourself out.
And keep it fun. And I mean, find other people to train with as well, because then, especially in your sort of more of an off season, you can really join up with other people because you don't have to be so specific about your sessions, so you can be a bit more flexible, which I think is really a nice way to train.
Cool, nice and simple one. Next one.
Joe Williams 3358 says, I'm currently training for Ironman around a full-time job. Like many of us, I'm sure. I'm fortunate in the Southern Hemisphere to have 3 weeks off work over the summer. Nice. 3 months, and that's 3 months out from my race. How would you suggest adjusting my training to have a bit of focused camp without overtraining?
This is a good question. And I think you've probably highlighted the biggest issue to these kind of training camps. I see a lot of people heading out to Mallorca for a massive week of training. If you suddenly triple your training volume out of the blue, your body's going to get one hell of a shock, and you're risking overtraining, maybe even running the risk of injury. But what you can focus on more is actually your recovery. That's the bit where you're actually really going to make the most out of it. And it does mean you can still increase the volume, but you need to make sure that you are making the most of that extra recovery as well. If you're filling the whole day with
all the DIY and going to see friends and just being flat out,
then you're going to get caught out pretty quick. Now, you could do a bit more swimming. I'd argue actually you could probably do quite a lot of swimming, just your normal day-to-day training in and around work. Running-wise, yes, you could up that, but actually you could run the risk of injury. It's probably the most risky. And given that you are training for an Ironman, probably the biggest gain and the biggest area is actually just upping the bike volume. That's the one that you're probably going to be safest in upping the volume on, and suddenly getting these long days of riding.
And it's 3 weeks is quite unusual. You know, often, like you said, it's a week-long camp, and then you kind of like, how do I use this week? Because you just want to go. But 3 weeks, you can actually build into that as well. It's quite a decent chunk of training time. So you don't have to just like go on day one. Right, let's go for this.
Definitely, yeah. When it does come to training camps, as I say, you can get away with increasing the volume. We would still suggest probably no more than 15 to 20% on your normal training volume. So just keep that in mind. As I say, I've known a lot of people heading out to Mallorca and going bit crazy for a week and coming home broken. So you've been warned. Right, final question. Trying to understand this one a little bit. Okay, so it comes from Atlantis Welder. I've started inserting zone 4, zone 5 and zone 6 power intervals randomly, conveniently throughout my zone 2 rise, which can start on the road but finish sometimes on the trainer. My quality per set seems to be solid versus struggling and suffering doing 6 minute, 15 minute and 30 minutes at zone 6, 5 and 4 power training. I'm doing high intensity work now versus I wasn't before, and I'm tracking my weekly volumes. Is this dumb? Everyone else wants to design a specific single-use workout and follow them with rest days. I really enjoy constant efforts each day. Okay, right. Quite a lot going on there.
I know. I'm still reading it for the third time, still trying to interpret what they're asking.
No, actually, there is a lot to gain from doing these sort of high intensity intervals in your training.
Of course, yeah.
Neuromuscularly, so you're actually going to actually help to activate the muscles better and more of the muscle essentially to cut out the science. Just go simple terms here. But I would say that to actually benefit and maximize those sessions, you do really need to value the recovery. That if you are hitting zone 4 and above day in, day out, you're going to find that whilst your heart rate may be hitting those intensities, actually the power that you're able to put out as the days go on will start to drop off, and therefore actually the quality you're getting from them is just going to slowly deteriorate. And actually you're just killing yourself and actually risking overtraining. So you would be far better off doing almost alternating, doing an aerobic, easy kind of recovery day in between.
Well, I think also that the wording is slightly confusing. So you're putting in zone 4, 5 and 6 within my zone 2 ride, but then it's not a zone 2 ride. So I think that's actually a bit confusing. And that's a mistake that a lot of triathletes make, because you think, I've just done a few bits here, but it's actually a zone 2 ride. Well, it's not. As soon as you've gone out of zone 2, it's actually the higher zone is the training that it was, because if you go and do a zone 4 session, you still do a warm-up that's going to be in zone 1 or 2. You do a warm down, you do your recovery. That's all in that other zone, and the percentage will be larger in that zone, but you're not going to come back and go, oh, I'm exhausted from that zone 2 ride. So I think it's also a little bit of how you word your training in your own head.
Unless you're Christian Blumenfeld and you just call everything zone 2.
Well, yeah.
Just for mind games.
Okay, there we go.
That's what I do as well. Anyway, yeah, thanks for all the questions. As I say, please keep them coming in using the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. And we'll see you next time. Thanks very much.